Hello. Just going to talk about some of my books I got recently because some of them are pretty neat. So I'm just going to jump into it and only give a few words about each one. So yeah, the first one here I was really pleased to find is Giacomo Leopardi, The Moral Essays. And if you know Leopardi, you can get his poems and then also his Zibaldone, which is notebooks. And this here is really interesting. A lot of them are dialogues, but like one is a history of the human race. And they generally go from a more pessimistic viewpoint of humanity or human life in general. But so I was really pleased to find that one. I'd read some of it at my library already, so I knew I was going to like it, but I just wanted to get a copy. Another one I was pleased to find, since I'd been looking for it for a while but didn't really decide to just purchase it on my own, is John Maynard Keynes, The General Theory of Employment, Money, and Interest. And I was interested in this one because you mostly hear about the like Marx and that sort of communist economics, and then you hear about the Austrian school and like Milton Friedman and that type of stuff. And I'm really not interested in any of that. But I am interested in this like trend of more socialism, which starts at like John Stuart Mill, which I have his Principles of Political Economy, and then it's John Maynard Keynes. So I at least just want to read it and see what's up with it. And another interesting one I found the same day was this Origins of the Chinese Revolution. And it's written by a French guy, Lucien Bianco. But, it's just obvious that China's going to be a huge force throughout my whole life. And I just want to learn a little bit about it, just so I know. And I also really like the literature. So just getting a little background of what happened in the early 20th century in China, one of the biggest countries in the world, I think would be valuable. And And then another one. So I'd known about this book for a while and I'd read some of it in English, but this was so cheap and it's like basically a perfect edition. I got Julio Cortázar, his Rayuela, which is translated as hopscotch in English. But yeah, it's a pretty neat book and has some photos in it and everything that makes it even more interesting. So yeah, I was really pleased to find it, and it was so cheap, $4, completely unwritten in, new basically. I think even being in Texas, I think books that are written in foreign languages are really underappreciated, mainly because no one speaks anything else. I'm surprised, though, that Spanish is so underappreciated as far as books go because, there's a huge Spanish population here, Spanish-speaking population. But, because I found some amazing stuff. Like, I found Gran Sotal Veredas in the Portuguese for clearance here, which, even though I don't read Portuguese yet, it's pretty close to Spanish, so I went ahead and got it anyway. And apparently there's a new translation of that book in English that's supposed to be out like next year. So Alison Etrekin or something like that was the translator. But she's Australian, so that I'm excited for that. Look into it. And another one I got, which it's kind of like an offhanded thing, but Charles Dickens' Pickwick Papers. Because I've never read a Charles Dickens book all the way through. I always get stuck with the language because I don't like how he writes really at all, or like how he structures stories. But I'm thinking if I read his earliest book, and also if I read the one that Fernando Pessoa said one of his greatest regrets is that he could never read the Pickwick Papers for the first time again. So I'm thinking, I'll at least imagine I'm Fernando Pessoa reading it for the first time, even if I don't enjoy it. So, got the Pickwick Papers. And then Okay, these next two are tied for the most interesting that I've gotten recently, and I'm very, very pleased by both of them. This next one here is one of those Harvard presses, like the Dumbarton Oaks or Loeb Classics or the Renaissance Library. This one is the Murty Classical Library of India, and it is Arjuna and the Hunter by Bharavi. And I think these editions look so nice, especially these Indian ones. The blue Italian ones are really nice too, but yeah, this one, Bharavi was a poet from, I think, the 6th century, and wrote in Sanskrit. And he was one of the promoters of court epics, that's what they called it. This specific one is from a scene in the Mahabharata, which is, their big, epic work. And just reading the introduction of this, just talking about how they saw poetry and seeing how the translation from Sanskrit to English goes is so interesting. Because Sanskrit, I gather, is more fluid with the ordering of words. So it takes more skill to work out what something means. And he gave an example of this, which just reads really nicely. The example, even though it's a little bit less clean, it reads like interesting poetry. But yeah, there's another one I was also interested in is the the Clay Sanskrit Library, which I guess quit printing anything in 2009, but they did half of the Mahabharata. They did the Ramayana, and they did Kalidasa, who's considered one of the best poets in Sanskrit, who came before Bharavi. But yeah, I just find it so enjoyable to read this because it's so unique and interesting. And then also getting to see the Sanskrit. They include the Sanskrit on the other page. So if you see that, it's just so neat to read. The numbers too. So yeah, I'd recommend, if you've never read any Sanskrit stuff, look at the Murty Classical Library. See if you find something you're interested in. It's very interesting. Very, very, very cool. And then, yeah, this other one I was extremely happy to find, partially because it's something you'll never see on its own, or just randomly anywhere, is this Gershom Scholem, who was friends with Walter Benjamin, The Origins of the Kabbalah. And I was especially pleased to find this because a while ago I had found his biography of Sabbatai Sevi, or however you say his name, Sabbatai Sevi, who was this, born in, I think, 1625, died in 1675. He was a Jewish prophet, and around the year 1666, they thought he was going to be the Messiah figure, the prophet figure. He obviously wasn't, but he wrote the Gershom Scholem wrote a 900-page biography about him, which is just so unusual. Just that time period in the Middle East, it's just so unusual to be able to read about that. But it's a little much for what I'm capable of taking in now, so I at least decided to get this Origins of the Kabbalah, which the Kabbalah was, kind of this mystical text, or the mystical tradition. He says it starts in 12th century, 13th century in France and Spain. And then people may know of the Zohar, which is one of the most famous texts of that. But I've also been into the Kabbalah. Well, I've kept notice of it from Finnegan's Wake, because a lot of people with Finnegan's Wake talk about the Kabbalah and make a big deal about it. So I'm going to see if there's actually anything there, because I don't know about it. And I generally try to stay away from this sort of mystical type stuff, because I haven't found it to be valuable in the past. But we'll see. And then this last one I got, which is just interesting. It's just something to have on hand that you can just look at every once in a while. And also, and eventually I'd like to be able to read some Anglo-Saxon stuff, like Old English stuff. And this is a concise Anglo-Saxon dictionary. And I have something similar to this, which is called Word Hoard, which is, I think, like the 1,000 most common words you'll see. So you just memorize it and you can read like 80% of Old English stuff. But yeah, this is actually a dictionary. So just something to have. So I do plan on getting all of the Old English works or manuscripts and just reading it someday whenever I get bored. So yeah. If you guys have read any of these books, tell me what you thought about them. Convince me to read them next. Yeah, these are some of the books I got recently, ones I'm really happy with, and I am planning on making a video on the Cesare Pavese, the Business of Living, because it's a very good book, and I wanted to talk about it in my other video, but got cut off because my phone has a limit. All right, well, I gotta go to school now, and death is a gang boss.